You've got so many different types of politics. You've got 28 national governments. You've got coalition governments in certain countries. You've got all sorts of massive pressures. It's extremely complex, the European Union. And I'm afraid to say that's why it's so dysfunctional.
Psychopaths are running the world. Former U.S. Marine blows the whistle on Syrian false flag, exposes real agenda. But first off, let's look at the, quote, migrant crisis, because within that you have a prism through which you can see all the spectrums of lies, the entire cacophony of fraud. First off, they're not migrants. A migrant would be, say, Bedouin in Saudi Arabia, who by law are allowed as desert people to just basically cross highways wherever they want, block traffic, do whatever they want. It's kind of like farmers are allowed to drive 10 miles an hour down the side of the road with their tractor because it's part of the culture, it's part of commerce, it's part of what was before, and to engage in some of those ancient migrations. That is what a migrant is. People out of North Africa, the Middle East, Asia, you name it, coming in on boats, coming in on planes, driving in, walking in, carjacking, truckjacking, and then coming in by the hundreds of thousands per month per country and just demanding everything free is not a migrant.
What we're seeing right now throughout the EU is it's split between those who support this new border and Coast Guard service wholeheartedly. That's here in Germany, also the French, also Greece supporting it, but they're having their hand forced somewhat. That's just because they're overwhelmed with the amount of refugees that have been arriving on some of the tiny Greek islands there. When I was in the island of Samos just this summer, I was speaking to Coast Guards there, and they were saying that they'll take any help that they can get. However, the reason that this becomes controversial, it will be able to intervene in essentially the sovereign borders of member states without having their permission. Now, that could potentially cause huge rifts. It could be seen as Brussels interfering in the internal integrity of member states. It's something that's going to rile up Eurosceptics across Europe. It will, however, when it comes in, only affect the Schengen zone, but those Schengen nations on the border, particularly those in the east and the Balkan area, well, they could face the possibility of having their borders taken away, or control of their borders taken away from them. When that happens, well, that's going to upset some people quite seriously.
You can enter the Schengen area at any border like Spain, travel anywhere in Europe, across countries which are part of the zone, and exit, say, through Finland without having to pass through border controls or even have your passport checked. It's worth noting that the UK and Ireland, despite being part of the EU, aren't part of the Schengen zone. The Schengen area recognises the free movement of persons as a fundamental right guaranteed by the EU.
But let me just say one final thing, which is the thing I thought about most. This is a manageable crisis for Europe and for Britain, which is a secondary part of it, provided the Europeans find some way of regaining control over the borders. If they can't regain control over their borders, it's just not clear where it ends and what it does. But one possibility is the borders go up all across Europe.
Sweden has adopted a new measure to limit the number of refugees entering the country. Police have begun checking the IDs of everyone arriving in the country by bus, train, or ferry from Denmark. Those lacking valid documents will be returned. More than 160,000 asylum seekers entered Sweden in 2015, mainly from Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan, giving rise to serious logistical problems. Most of the asylum seekers lacked passports or equivalent IDs. Germany, Austria, France, Belgium, and other European countries have already reintroduced border checks. The move sparked criticism from rights activists who argue that it limits refugees' possibilities to seek asylum.
If I show up at your house and knock on the door and say, hi, I'm a migrant, and I'd like you to have me move into your bedroom, as they're doing in Sweden, telling them how's the illegals, I would be an invader, and you'd laugh at me and say, get off my front porch. But see, if you're brought in by the government and put on welfare, given driver's license, voting cards, you're now a protected group. And it's wrong. I can't go to Saudi Arabia. I can't go to Syria. I can't go to Libya and get stuff for free. I can't have a baby for free. It's a fraud. And this is a political, admitted Cloward-Piven plan to collapse the West, and it's working quite nicely. Okay? And if you poll even recent immigrants that came legally, they don't want this either. They're not crazy. They're running from the destabilization of the Middle East. Most of those wars were unpopular. NATO and others launched this attack on Syria, and these aren't even the Syrians we attacked that are coming in. These are the Wahhabists on record that are coming in. The very people who've been involved in the takeover, now they can't get the central government of Damascus. They can't get the last third of the country that has the biggest population, so they're out there with nothing. So they are refugees from their attempted takeover. They launched an evil revolution with Saudi Arabian forces and Qatari forces and others with the West backing them. This has all been declassified. Defense intelligence head, the general, went public. Deputy head of the CIA went public this week. Everything we told you years ago, now all admitted, because we have the sources.
Differing agendas and competing visions. This is how the Syrian civil war is being fought today. Washington and its allies continue to pursue a policy focused on desired political outcomes. On the other hand, Russia and its allies target and destroy terrorists. Is working at cross purposes what keeps this war going.
Assalamu alaikum. Peace to you all. My name is Saba Ahmed. I'm a law student at American University. I am here to ask you a simple question. I know that we portray Islam and all Muslims as bad, but there's 1.8 billion Muslim followers of Islam. We have 8 million plus Muslim Americans in this country, and I don't see them represented here. But my question is, how can we fight an ideological war with weapons? How can we ever end this war?
Great question. I am so glad you're here, and I am so glad you brought that up because it gives us an opportunity to answer. What I find so amazing is since the beginning of this panel, which we are here about Benghazi attack against our people, not one person mentioned Muslims. We are here against Islam, or we're launching war against Muslims. We are here to discuss how 4 Americans died and what our government is doing. We were not here to bash Muslims. You were the one who brought up the issue about most Muslims, not us. And since you brought it up, allow me to elaborate with my answer. There are 1.2 billion Muslims in the world today. Of course, not all of them are radicals. The majority of them are peaceful people. The radicals are estimated to be between 15 to 25%, according to all intelligence services around the world. That leaves 75% of them peaceful people. But when you look at 15 to 25% of the world Muslim population, you're looking at 180 million to 300 million people dedicated to the destruction of Western civilization. That is as big of the United States. So why should we worry about the radicals, 15 to 25%? Because it is the radicals that kill. Because it is the radicals that behead and massacre. When you look throughout history, when you look at all the lessons of history, most Germans were peaceful. Yet the Nazis drove the agenda. And as a result, 60 million people died. Almost 14 million in concentration camps. 6 million were Jews. The peaceful majority were irrelevant. When you look at Russia, most Russians were peaceful as well. Yet the Russians were able to kill 20 million people. The peaceful majority were irrelevant. When you look at China, for example, most Chinese were peaceful as well. Yet the Chinese were able to kill 70 million people. The peaceful majority were irrelevant. When you look at Japan prior to World War II, most Japanese were peaceful as well. Yet Japan was able to butcher its way across Southeast Asia, killing 12 million people, mostly killed with bayonets and shovels. The peaceful majority were irrelevant. On September 11th in the United States, we had 2.3 million Arab Muslims living in the United States. It took 19 hijackers, 19 radicals to bring America down to its knees, destroy the World Trade Center, attack the Pentagon, and kill almost 3,000 Americans that day. The peaceful majority were irrelevant. So for all our powers of reasons and us talking about moderate and peaceful Muslims, I'm glad you're here. But where are the others speaking out? And since you are the only Muslim representative, save the applause till the end. And since you're the only Muslim representative in here, you took the limelight instead of speaking about why our government, and I assume, are you an American? you're an American citizen. So as an American citizen, you sat in this room, and instead of standing up and saying a question or asking something about our 4 Americans that died and what our government is doing to correct the problem, you stood there to make a point about peaceful, moderate Muslims. I wish you brought 10 with you to question about how we can hold our government responsible.
He did bow to the Muslim king, while he did not do it to the British Queen of England. And by bowing, he showed the world that I am subservient. I do bow down to you as a Muslim king, something no other president has done with Saudi Arabia. The Saudi king is his peer. He is not his subordinate in order to bow for him. And this is exactly what Obama did. Usually it is out of respect that someone would nod his head when bowing to royalty, and the ladies will give curtsy. But Obama went beyond what is required as a head of state and bowed to the Saudi king, and that's unacceptable. It sent the wrong symbol.
When you say it sends the wrong signal, what signal do you think it sends?
It sent a message that Islam is superior to any other master or king or president in the world, that an American president bowed to a Muslim king. It also sent a message that terrorism and jihadism is giving Islam the respect it should have on the world stage, to the point that it made an American president, for the first time in history, bow to a Muslim king.
It is time we take political correctness and throw it in the garbage where it belongs and start calling it.
If you wanted a quiet life, you should have become a monk or a nun. You shouldn't have gone into politics, because it is the people's right to lobby and demand action from their elected representatives.
It's obviously a hideous attack, and we've all seen pictures of it and read about it. And first of all, full credit to the person and people who took on this attacker, and full credit to the very brave police officers who managed to subdue him. What we have in our country is a growing pool of police who do carry arms, the armed response vehicles and other police involved in protective security. Their number will grow, and it's right that we have enough people to respond. But I think it's right that police aren't routinely armed in our country. And I think this event simply showed again what brilliant and brave and dedicated people there are. Let me also pay credit to the person who made that brilliant statement about you ain't no Muslim. I think some of us have dedicated speeches and media appearances and sound bites and everything to this subject, but you ain't no Muslim, bruv, said it all much better than I ever could, and thank you, because that will be applauded around the country.
It is now time for us to do our bit in Syria, and that is why I ask my colleagues to vote for this motion tonight.
Which again is the clash of civilizations. Destabilize the Middle East, put their forces in, and then just have them go around raising havoc, and then call them angel cakes when they come here. Just like 4 years ago with the attempted overthrow of Egypt, they took out our old ally, put in the Wahhabists again, the Muslim Brotherhood. They went around enslaving, blowing up churches, murdering people in mass, killing tens of thousands.
When the Arab people were fighting for freedom and democracy, in 2011, I was in Tahrir Square in Cairo for 9 out of the 18 days that brought down the Mubarak dictatorship. And I remember what David Cameron was doing when we were fighting for freedom. He was backing up the Mubarak dictatorship while we were looking down the barrels of the tanks that were trying to crush the Arab Spring. So don't lecture me about democracy and terrorism in the Middle East. And after I had been in Cairo, I was asked by some friends to go to Tunisia, where the revolution was overthrowing the dictator Ben Ali. And I remember what David Cameron was doing when we were at the center of those events. And I have to tell you, the person that was by the side of me in Tunis was Jeremy Corbyn. I remember what David Cameron was doing. He was backing up the dictatorship of Ben Ali when we were fighting it in the streets. So don't lecture us about who stands for democracy and who stands for terrorism in the Middle East. But to be fair, when the Foreign Office eventually caught up with events, when they eventually understood that they couldn't save the dictatorship in Cairo, David Cameron did go. He did go to Tahrir Square. He stood in Tahrir Square. And who was stood with him? Who was on the delegation with him? BAE Systems and the arms selling corporations who were trying to do deals with the new Egyptian government to rearm them for the bullets they'd spent shooting at the protesters. This government are corporate puppets.
Who gave coalition forces in Libya the right to eliminate Gaddafi? Well, that's the question Vladimir Putin's been asking during an official visit to Denmark. The Russian premier also said NATO's effectively joined one of the warring sides in the conflict, and more responsible action should be taken instead. RT's Daniel Bushell joins us now live for this in Brussels. Daniel, so the Russian prime minister has effectively lashed out on the operation there in Libya.
Yes, he's made the speech in Denmark and he was very angry. He says that Gaddafi is not the best person in the world. Sure, he's made many mistakes, done many bad things, but that does not give the coalition the right to bomb indiscriminately. His words were that they are bombing Gaddafi's palaces in Tripoli every night. Now, a coalition said that their plan was not to get rid of Gaddafi. So his question was, Mr. Putin's question was, why are the coalition forces obviously making this effort to go after Colonel Gaddafi himself? Now, we also heard that the experts here in Brussels have confirmed that there is bombing going on by the coalition forces, which is not being covered by the media here in the European Union. Mr. Putin added that oil was a key interest for the Western powers, for the European powers who have gone into Libya, that they want to get rid of Gaddafi and install people who are more favourable to the European Union so that European companies can control the oil reserves. Let's have a listen to exactly what Mr. Putin had to say.
The coalition said destroying Gaddafi was not their goal. Then why bomb his palaces? Now some officials have claimed that eliminating him was in fact their goal. Who gave them that right? Did he have a fair trial? Returning to the no-fly zone, the bombings are destroying the country's entire infrastructure. When the so-called civilized world uses all its military power against a small country destroying what's been created by generations, I don't know if that's good.
This government is a PR government for arms dealers. Government can't remember what happened in the last war because it's too busy looking for the next war. That's the truth. Now I have as much reason to oppose the reactionary, counter-revolutionary Islamic State as anyone here, because it was the tool of Saudi Arabia and it helped to crush the Arab Spring. But I'll tell you this, if that horrific regime ever stabilized itself in the Middle East, if it ever became a proper state, if it ever made it possible for the Islamic State to build a stable oil industry and to sell it, if it became that kind of state, I'll tell you what would happen with David Cameron and his friends. They'd sell it guns and they'd buy its oil and they'd treat it just like they treat any other state. And I tell you why we know that. Because if the Islamic State built a stable state, it would look just like Saudi Arabia. So do not dare to talk to us about democracy and freedom in the Middle East, because we know more about it than you will learn in a lifetime. Now I have a word for those Labour MPs that are going to support the corporatists, the arms dealers, the warmongers. First of all, a word about lobbying and a word about petitioning. Now, we have fought in generations, from the levellers to the Chartists to the suffragettes, to be able to lobby and petition our MPs. Yes! Our forebears died in this square, demanding and defending that right. And if you think for one moment we are going to give it up or stop doing it, think again. It's not going to happen. How dare David Cameron describe anyone in the anti-war movement as a terrorist sympathizer?
They've done this, problem, reaction, solution. It all ties together to the very same central system. That's why free speech, criticizing globalism, has to be banned by authoritarian EU. That's why demonstrations in England are banned and people are arrested, because they cannot allow people to ever stand up. The system is tripling and quadrupling down on oppression. And the harder they squeeze, like a beach ball into the water, the more it's coming up. These are historical paradigms that we are extremely well aware of. Breaking down the communities, getting people to tattletale on each other, setting up controllers like George Soros and others who would manage ghettos and then make the Jews and others think they were on their side and then feed on them. That's what the ADL, Southern Poverty Law Center, all these groups are literally the children of the people that were the master Judas goats to feed on those groups. That's a microcosm. The Soviets do the same thing. They invented the term back in the 30s, a political correct or correct political speech is what it translates out of. They had commissars, political officers, thought police, who would go around pushing this stuff with the NKVD and other groups. But they didn't have to enforce it themselves because there were throngs of people that would fawn to the black uniforms, to the black boots, to all of it, and want to prove their worthiness. So domestically, they're coming in with a Strong Cities UN initiative that actually in D.C. and L.A. and Chicago are building UN substations, UN embassies that will nexus with police and others to make sure the police and local governments are behaving correctly. Now, why do they want the local police? Schwarzenegger heads up the munionization program of the UN. They can't get the states to go along with carbon taxes or the feds to pass it. So Obama does it by executive at the top illegally. They're going to then come in with these commissions, these Truth and Reconciliation Commissions. That's what all the demonization of police is about. A lot of it legitimate, but the end is evil to then globalize them. And if they get certified by the UN, if they follow and become political police and go after people's speech and guns and the rest of it, the UN will give them political cover and succor. This is the system. You already see the UN at the border. Now, continuing. There's hundreds of ways they're going to counterstrike us, but make no mistake, they legalized the CIA operating domestically. It was already happening with, quote, deception last year. That was in the Washington Post. That was in Foreign Affairs. We played the Pentagon press releases, literally saying, don't run, we're your friends. Quote, the Army Undersecretary of Defense. You can watch the hour video saying, we're sorry we've lied to you. Now we're going to be involved in every town and city interfacing with you with the truth. They're actually hiring at Facebook in Germany, former high-level Stasi, the worst police state ever, to work at Facebook and censor people and then report to police, and people are fined or arrested for just saying, I don't think we should have open borders. I mean, Germany is under martial law, so is France. Demonstrations are banned, but the left is allowed to and attack police because they're getting ready to overthrow even the local governments, folks. The model for internet censorship is going to be phased in Chinese-style net censorship. Net IDs, net taxes, 3 strikes and you're out net rules. But before they get to that, they're going to phase in. It starts this next year in China, and they're already lining up with Facebook, Google, all of them agreeing with China, Microsoft, to implement these systems where China already does it, and then they beta test there and then bring it here. Everything you do in China, from your credit score to what you buy, to discount cards, to your internet records, to what you say on social networks, is integrated into an algorithm. And if you criticize the government basically once, You can't even buy or sell. You can't get a hotel. You can't travel. Now, notice all this is being phased in here with the IRS saying, if we start auditing you or don't even start an investigation, you can't fly. Internal checkpoints. I mean, it's on, folks. So Europe's doing the same thing. This is all being brought in. It's being implemented. They're flaming crooks, annihilating our country, spying on us illegally, opening our borders, having the Border Patrol complete the smuggling process. I mean, this is the globalist offensive. Food prices in the third world have gone up past 50%. They know at that point riots start. They already have their operatives ready to steer the revolutions into radical Al-Qaeda, radical ISIS, radical Al-Nusra, Saudi Arabian driven. Same thing here. They're going to have a big communist, kill the cops, shoot the cops, burn the cities. They're going to let them do it, order the cops to stand down, and then say, cops, it's your fault, capitulate, go under UN control. I mean, it's on, folks. Everyone should use this Christmas holiday season. They want to focus you talking about terrorism and fear so that you give your rights up. Free speech came out of Magna Carta 1215. Tony Blair, before he left office, said, I'm proud of the fact that I killed Magna Carta. I mean, these are declarations of naked tyranny. They've killed real culture. And I just see these floundering men everywhere and floundering women that don't understand how the world really works, folks. Now, continuing, what is their counterstrike going to be? It's going to be social shunning, like they did in Nazi Germany from 1933 until about 1939. Hitler didn't start rounding up his political opposition, whether they were conservative, liberal, it didn't matter, whether they were Jewish, communist, German high command, until 39. At first, it was demonization. At first, it don't give you licenses. At first, it's not let you do business. At first, it's telling people don't do business with them or you'll be shunned. Then by 37, 38, they start knocking the windows out. Then they start burning people's businesses down. Then they say, you go to this ghetto and you live there, to all these different political groups, and then they start arresting you and selectively going after folks.
We are not here for your convenience. We are not here to turn up once every 5 years so that you can sit on your fat asses in the benches in Parliament, being paid more than twice the average wage of people who live in this city. We are not here to pay you to have a life that we could never have. You are there to do what we tell you and what we demand of you. And we will be saying from the Stop the War Coalition to all our allies in the trade union movement, when we see the list, the traitors list tonight, not one single penny of union members' money should go to one single Labour MP who votes for war tonight. This farce has got to stop. We began a revolution in this country in the summer, where 250,000 people demonstrated against austerity, when 100,000 people marched in favour of refugees. When Jeremy Corbyn was elected, we were telling the political establishment we're not going to have it anymore. Let's make sure. Let's make sure we know more about it than you will learn in a lifetime.
What we have now, in effect, is a emerging proxy war on that land between definitely Russia, supported by China and Iran, who are attacking American backed rebels, and I love them. They call them moderates. There is no moderation in what any of them are doing in Syria. And it could go any way.
Came across proxy war, and I thought, let me actually get the proper definition for myself. In this edition, I'll be answering the question, what is a proxy war? Because if you look, at the current geopolitical arena right now, you've got a lot of proxy wars happening. And those proxy wars are basically, And this time they're basically a lead up into World War III. As a proxy war is a conflict between two nations where neither country directly engages the other. Right, which is what you're seeing right now. You're seeing America hurting the interests of Russia. You're seeing China and America hurting each other's interests. The US via Ukraine shot down a flipping passenger jet just to blame it, just to use it as propaganda against Russia. When you actually look at this, at the facts of that situation, you basically had a BBC Russia report, I believe it was, which where they interviewed women right after the fact, and they were saying there were two planes. Russian radar says there were two planes, and then they basically had the guy who said he was the one who was acting under orders to shoot down the plane, and they polygraphed him, and it came out that he was lying.
President Bashar al-Assad of Syria, thank you very much for talking to RT today.
You're most welcome in Damascus.
So, many people were convinced a year ago that you wouldn't make it this far. But yet again, we're sitting in a newly renovated presidential palace and recording this interview. Who exactly is your enemy at this point?
My enemy is terrorism, the instability in Syria. This is our enemy. It's not about people. It's not about persons. The whole issue is not about me staying or leaving. It's about the country being safe or not. So this is the enemy that we've been fighting as Syrians.
At this point, you are not the target anymore. Syria is.
I wasn't the target. I wasn't the problem. Anyway, the West always created enemies. It was the communism, then it became the Islam, then it became Saddam Hussein for different reasons, and now they wanted to create a new enemy, Bashar. So they said the problem is the president, so he has to leave.
After decades of mistrust,
states like these and their terrorist allies constitute an axis of evil,
animosity,
it is America and their agents who promote terrorism.